In the middle of the cold Pacific Ocean, there was a small island. On this island, there was a prison. This prison had a scary name. The name was Alcatraz. People called it the Rock because the island was just rock and water. The water around Alcatraz was super cold. The water had strong currents. These currents could pull a person down very fast. Sharks lived in this water too. So Alcatraz was not a nice place. Who lived in Alcatraz? The most dangerous criminals in America lived there. The government sent bad guys to Alcatraz when other prisons could not hold them. Alcatraz had thick walls, strong bars, and many guards. The guards watched the prisoners all the time. Day and night, the guards were there. In 1960, 3 new prisoners arrived at Alcatraz. Their names were Frank Morris, John Anglin, and Clarence Anglin. John and Clarence were brothers. These 3 men were not violent criminals, but they were very smart. They escaped from other prisons before. That is why the government sent them to Alcatraz. The government thought, "These guys are too clever. We need to put them in the strongest prison." Frank Morris was the leader. He had a high IQ. This means he was really intelligent. Frank looked at Alcatraz and thought, "I do not want to stay here forever." John and Clarence felt the same way. They were tired of prison. They wanted freedom. They wanted to see their families again. They wanted to live normal lives. But there was one big problem. Everyone said escape from Alcatraz was impossible. In the 30 years before Frank and the Anglin brothers arrived, many prisoners tried to escape. All of them failed. Some prisoners died in the cold water. Other prisoners were caught and punished. The guards always said the same thing to new prisoners. They said, "Nobody escapes from Alcatraz. Nobody." However, Frank Morris did not believe this. He thought, "Maybe nobody escaped before, but maybe I can be the first." Frank started to watch everything. He watched the guards. He watched the walls. He watched the water. And slowly, very slowly, an idea started to grow in Frank's mind. Frank Morris was not just thinking about escape. He was planning it. Every day he looked around his cell. Every night he thought about the walls. Then one day Frank noticed something interesting. The walls of the cells were old. Very old. The air near the ocean was wet and salty. This wet air made the concrete soft. Frank touched the wall near his bed. A small piece fell off. Frank smiled. He thought, "Maybe these walls are not so strong." Frank told John and Clarence about his idea. He said, "We can dig through these walls." The brothers looked at the thick concrete. They thought Frank was crazy. But Frank explained his plan. He said, We will dig very slowly. We will dig at night when the guards cannot see us. We will hide the holes during the day. John and Clarence listened carefully. Then they said, "Okay, let's try." "But how do you dig through a concrete wall?" The prisoners did not have tools. They did not have hammers or drills. So Frank used his intelligence. He found old spoons in the prison kitchen. He found a small drill that another prisoner threw away. These tools were tiny and weak, but Frank said, "We will use these." Every night after the lights went off, Frank, John, and Clarence started to dig. They dug quietly, very quietly. The sound was soft, like a mouse walking. Night after night, they dug small holes behind their beds. The work was slow and hard. Sometimes their hands hurt. Sometimes they felt tired and wanted to stop. But they did not stop. After many months, the holes became bigger. The holes were big enough for a man to climb through. However, there was another problem. Every morning, guards walked past the cells. They checked on all the prisoners. If the guards saw the holes, the escape plan would fail. So Frank had another clever idea. He said, "We need to hide the holes." The men used pieces of cardboard. They painted the cardboard the same color as the wall. During the day, they put the cardboard over the holes. The guards walked past and saw nothing strange. But Frank knew hiding the holes was not enough. On the night of the escape, the guards would check the beds. If the beds were empty, the guards would sound the alarm immediately. So Frank needed something else. He needed fake heads. Frank and the Anglin brothers worked for months to make fake heads. They collected soap from the prison bathroom. They mixed the soap with toilet paper to make it soft like clay. Then they shaped the soap into heads. The heads looked like real human heads. But the heads needed hair. So the prisoners collected hair from the prison barber shop. They glued the hair onto the soap heads. They even painted faces on the heads with paint they stole from the prison art room. When the fake heads were finished, they looked real. In the dark, a guard could not see the difference. Finally, everything was ready. Frank chose the escape date. It was June 11th, 1962. On that evening, Frank, John, and Clarence felt nervous but excited. They thought, "Tonight we become free men, or we die trying." When the lights went off at 9:30, the three men waited. They listened to the guards walking. They heard the sounds of the prison becoming quiet. Then, around 10 o'clock, they started. First, they put the fake heads in their beds. They covered the heads with blankets. The heads looked like sleeping men. Frank looked at his fake head and smiled. He thought, "Good luck, friend. Do your job well tonight." Then Frank, John, and Clarence climbed through the holes in their walls. Behind the walls was a dark space. This space led to the roof. The three men climbed up pipes and metal bars. It was dark and scary. The metal was cold and wet. Sometimes their hands slipped, but they did not stop. After 30 minutes, they reached the roof. The night air was cold. The wind was strong. Below them, they could see the black ocean. The water looked angry and dangerous. For a moment, the men felt afraid. But they remembered their plan. They took out their raft. The raft was made from raincoats. For months, they stole raincoats and glued them together. The raft was not beautiful, but it could float. Frank, John, and Clarence carried the raft down to the water. They pushed the raft into the cold, dark ocean. Then they climbed onto it and started to paddle. The prison lights became smaller and smaller behind them. The three men disappeared into the darkness. Nobody saw them again. The next morning, the sun came up slowly over Alcatraz. The guards started their usual morning routine. They walked past the cells to count the prisoners. One guard walked past Frank Morris's cell. He saw a head on the pillow. He thought, "Morris is still sleeping." The guard moved to the next cell. He saw John Anglin's head. Then he saw Clarence Anglin's head. Everything looked normal. But one guard felt suspicious. Something seemed strange. He walked back to Frank's cell. He looked more carefully at the head on the bed. The head did not move. The guard shouted, "Morris, wake up!" Nothing happened. The guard opened the cell door. He touched the head. It was cold. It was soap. The guard's face went white. He ran to the other cells. All three beds had fake heads. All three prisoners were gone. Immediately, alarms started ringing all over the prison. Guards ran everywhere. They were shocked and angry. The warden could not believe it. He thought, "This is impossible. Nobody escapes from Alcatraz." But the empty cells told a different story. Frank Morris and the Anglin brothers were not there. The police started searching. They searched the whole island. They searched the water with boats. They used helicopters to look from the sky. They found some pieces of the raincoat raft floating in the water. They found a paddle. They found a bag with the prisoners' personal things. But they did not find the three men. Days passed. Then weeks passed. Then months passed. Still, nobody found Frank, John, or Clarence. The FBI investigated for 17 years. So what happened to them? This is the big mystery. Nobody knows the answer. Some people think the three men died in the cold water. The ocean near Alcatraz is very dangerous. The water temperature was only 13 degrees that night. A person can die in this water very quickly. Maybe Frank, John, and Clarence got too cold. Maybe the strong currents pulled them down. Maybe sharks attacked them. These people say they are dead. The ocean killed them. But other people disagree. These people think Frank and the Anglin brothers were too smart to die. They think the three men reached land safely. They think the men changed their names and started new lives. Some people say they saw the Anglin brothers in South America years later. Other people say Frank Morris lived quietly in another country until he was an old man. The FBI investigated for 17 years. In 1979, the FBI closed the case. They said, "We cannot find them. The case is finished." But the mystery is not finished. Today, people still ask the same question. Did Frank Morris and the Anglin brothers escape from Alcatraz? Or did the ocean win?